People of the eastern woodlands. A land rich in forests. Did you know that North America was once called Turtle Island? The Iroquois named it that because they believed Sky Woman fell out of the sky and the great turtle caught her, causing an island to form. The Iroquois include 5 groups: the Cayuga, the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, and the Seneca. These groups share many cultural traits such as language. When the Iroquois settled in present-day New York, the area was covered with thick forests. They said the forests were so thick that a squirrel could jump from tree to tree for 1,000 miles without touching the ground. Forest animals such as deer provided woodland groups with food and clothing. Farming the land. Because the forests were so thick, many groups in the eastern woodlands practiced a type of farming called slash and burn. They cut down or slashed trees, then they burned the undergrowth to clear room for crops. Ash from the burned vegetation helped to make the soil fertile. After a crop had been harvested, they left the plot empty for several years. The next year, another plot was cleared and planted. This method helped keep the soil from wearing out. Each spring, most groups planted the 3 sisters of maize, squash, and beans. In autumn, crops were harvested, dried, and stored for the winter. The Creek and Iroquois. Archaeologists believe the Creek of the southern woodlands are descendants of the Mississippian mound-building people. When a Creek town reached a population of about 400 to 600 people, about half the population would move to a new site. Creek villages. The Creek, known as the Muskogee today, arranged their towns around a large council house or chocofa. Family homes were wattle and dub huts, which are made from poles and covered with grass, mud, or thatch. Creek art. The Creek decorated their pots with wooden stamps. They pressed the carved stamps into pottery while it was still wet. Celebrations. Both the Creek and Iroquois celebrated the Green Corn Festival, honoring the summer's first maize crop. The Iroquois of the northern woodlands usually built their villages on the tops of steep-sided hills. The steep slopes formed natural defenses for the village. A high log fence was commonly built along the edge of a village for added protection. Quick check. Compare and contrast. How are Creek and Iroquois villages different? Iroquois villages. The Iroquois called themselves Haudenosaunee. In Iroquoian, this means people of the longhouse. Longhouses were large enough for several families and were made of bent poles covered with sheets of bark. The longest longhouse is thought to have been 334 feet. That's longer than a football field. Iroquois art. The Iroquois made fine beadwork called wampum. Wampum is polished beads made from shells that are woven together. It was used in ceremonies or as gifts. Sports. Both the Iroquois and the Creek played lacrosse. Lacrosse sometimes settled disagreements among groups. Government in the woodlands. Archaeologists group Native Americans in many ways. One way is by language. Find the language family of the Creek in the chart on this page. Native Americans can also be grouped by how they govern themselves. Some groups form confederacies. A confederacy is a union of people who join together for a common purpose. Creek government. To protect themselves from enemies, the Creek formed the Creek Confederacy. Most of the groups in the Confederacy spoke Muskogean languages. The groups also shared customs such as the Green Corn Festival. The Creek Confederacy divided its towns into war towns, red, and peace towns, white. Red towns declared war, planned battles, and held meetings with enemy groups. White towns passed laws and held prisoners. During periods of war, however, even people in peace towns joined in the fighting. When a new town formed, it maintained close ties to other towns. This kept the Creek Confederacy united. Iroquois Society. Iroquois women were leaders of their society and did most of the farming. They decided how land would be used and who would use it. Women were the heads of their clans. A clan is a group of families that share the same ancestor. The head of each clan was called a clan mother. No important decision could be made without the approval of the clan mother. Although the leaders of each village were men, it was the clan mothers who chose them and could also remove them. Iroquois government. Iroquois government. When the Iroquois people were a small group, they worked together to solve disagreements. When their numbers began to grow, arguments broke out among clans. According to Iroquois history, two Iroquois leaders, Daganawida and Hiawatha, saw that fighting was destroying their people. In the 1500s, the two leaders urged the Iroquois to work together for peace. In about 1570, 5 Iroquois groups joined together to form the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Iroquois League. Its goal was to maintain peace among the 5 Iroquois groups or nations. After the Tuscarora moved to New York from North Carolina in 1722, the Confederacy was called 6 Nations. The Confederacy is still active today.